All right. So this is Andre Koen. I want to say thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. And as many of you may know, we've kind of taken a hiatus in doing some of these videos, but we are back, and I am excited to be back. There's a lot of things that have happened in the world, a lot of things that we've learned since we've been away, and we want to bring those things right back to you. And so, one of these conversations that we want to bring to you is this one around this notion of power, position, and privilege. And the essential question really is power, a position, or privilege a problem? Is it a challenge, right? And I would suggest that, well, we'll get to the punchline in just a second. All right. So first and foremost, this notion of power. We all have a certain degree or certain level of power. And power, in this particular context, is your ability to get things done, right? So in science, it's about getting, being able to move an object or whatnot. But in this context, we're going to use that and build off of it to suggest that power is about the ability to get things done. So we all have certain degrees of power given our context, right? And so in the United States, what are some of the things that are necessary or things that you need to get things done? So education, relationships, networks, money, resources. These are all the things that allow us to be able to get things done. And so what are these things we're getting done? It's executing our values. It is accomplishing our goals and objectives, and it's building our relationships, right? So when we think about, what it is that we're trying to do, typically those are the kinds of things that we use our power to either attain, advance, or maintain, right? So attain, maintain, or advance our relationships, our values, and our goals, right? So there's that. And we also must recognize that in this conversation, so power is, how we get things done, and there are certain resources and certain ways we're looking at this notion of power. Then there is this notion of position. And so oftentimes positions come with authority, right? And so we all have a certain degree of position related to the authority that we have, right? So an example is looking at a family structure. Typically there are parents or guardians who have a position in that family. You have siblings, and birth order gives folks position in that structure, right? So oldest children, there are expectations of oldest children, there are expectations of middle children, and there are expectations of youngest children, and there are a lot of expectations for only children, right? So when we think about this position in organizations, oftentimes we associate that with an organizational hierarchical structure. And so your position in that organization is important as it allows you to leverage power or use power, right? And so we're starting to see how these kind of things build. And then next is this notion of privilege. And because oftentimes I have position, a position in an organization or family structure, community, that gives me sometimes access to power, right? But this notion of privilege is somewhat kind of a prickly pear, if you will, right? So a lot of times people have heard privilege, but I want to kind of pivot just a little bit on this notion of privilege. So let's talk about privilege just for a second. And there are two types of privilege that I want to address. The first is earned privilege. earned privilege. And so earned privilege is these rights, these accesses that you have earned, given tenure, given accomplishments, given academic rigor. These are access that you get because you have accomplished something, right? And so there are certain rights and privileges that come with being an attorney, right? Having an institution saying you've passed the test, you've gone through the classes, we now grant you certain privileges. The same with medical doctors, the same with journeyman plumbers, right? Because they have a certain skill set, they are provided a certain amount or a certain level of privilege. Recognizing also that there are privileges that are given to us that are unearned, right? So, and people may wrestle with this quite a bit, but there are obviously unearned privileges that you get given your particular context, right? So, as an example, here in the United States, the national business language is English. And so growing up, learning and knowing English as my first language, there are certain hurdles that I may not have to jump if English is my second or third language, right? There are privileges that so-called able-bodied folks oftentimes don't even have to think about because it's not something that is noteworthy in terms of overcoming obstacles, right? So there are these unearned privileges that we oftentimes get. Beautiful people actually oftentimes get unearned privileges because of their beauty. And it's amazing to me if you ever get a chance to look at some of the beauty standards, particularly in Hollywood, and how many of these actors actually look like other actors. It's just really interesting, right? And so these are unearned privileges. So as a male, there are things that I don't have to think about in terms of my personal safety that that women may have to think about, right? Because those are privileges. Now, is power, is position, is privilege bad? I would suggest that they are forces of nature, right? Is winter bad? Only if you don't have the proper clothing, right? Are tornadoes bad? I would say if you are in the path of this natural disaster, that might be bad. But in and of itself, it is not evil. The tornado can do some devastating things, but it is not conscious of itself, right? And so when we think about this power, position, and privilege, I think that what we should be thinking about is when does this become problematic? And it becomes problematic when these things feel like they should be entitlements, right? That I deserve XYZ because of my power, because of my position, because of my privilege. And what one might say, because I've earned this, I should have these. But we recognize that there are ethics committees for these places where we have earned privileges, right? Because they help keep us humble, help us, in some ways, keep us in the pocket. This notion of power and position can be abused when we think that we just deserve it without recognizing the responsibility that comes with power, the responsibility that comes with position, the responsibility that comes with privilege. And so it's the notion of entitlement that becomes problematic. Oftentimes in workspaces that I've been in, I've heard this notion of white privilege. And I would suggest that there might even be black privilege given a proper context, that there could be Asian privilege given a particular context. And I would say that in any of those situations, if people are using their power, their position, their privilege, to accomplish goals, recognizing humility and recognizing the responsibility that comes with that, then they are striving to be effective. Where narcissists, people who just want to be self-serving, really lean into this entitlement piece and engage in power, position, and privilege for their own personal advantage without the recognition of the responsibility and the humility that should come with those things. And so this notion that privilege is problematic or bad, I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but I do ask, how are we using it to be effective? And so with that, we want to kind of talk about this notion of alignment, right? So when we are aligned, when our intentions, our values, our goals, and our behaviors are aligned, we are said to be effective. So this is the measurement, the stick, if you will, around how we should be measuring if our power, position, and privilege is being is leading us to effectiveness. It's this alignment that becomes really important. And so with that, we're going to kind of close out this conversation. I look forward to having more engaging conversations with you. If you have some questions, comments, please send us an email. We'll be more than happy to answer those things. My name is Andre Koen. I want to say thank you so much. And this changes everything. Have a great day. Bye.